Welcome to another F-Car Guy video. Today, as the title suggests, I'm going to attempt to remedy the situation that I have with my battery tender. So let me walk you through how mine's set up. I'm not 100% convinced that every FF is the same as mine. I swear I've seen pictures on the internet of other FFs that have a better solution than I do, but currently what I have, and I must apologise because I've already actually started this DIY before I started recording, so I'm going to have to walk you back retrospectively. But essentially, if you come into my boot, if I want to plug my battery tender in, I have to remove this panel. I'll go get that for you now. There it is. So I have to remove this panel, which, to be fair, they make easy by having this little finger pull. Up here I've got to remove that. Got to remove that panel, drop it down, and I can plug my battery tender in. Now it is removed, but it's normally, there it is, it's normally sitting on a bracket just about there, so behind the trim, so you have to pull that out to get to the tender. Now there are two things connected to this. We've got a 12 volt power outlet, and although it's not in there at the moment, an interior light. Now what happens is, I think it's the 12 volt power, basically that it's not long enough, so what happens is this doesn't sit down on the floor of the boot. It kind of hangs, pulling on those cables, and it's just a really it's just not a very elegant solution. So I needed to come up with something different. I contemplated cutting some sort of door. You can see where I've started. I'll walk you through that in a minute. I was contemplating cutting some sort of door into here to access the thing at the back, but I came up with another idea. So what I've been doing ever since I bought the car, I've literally just had the 12 volt power and the interior light completely disconnected, and this thing's been sitting in my garage for the past few months, and it's just been sitting like that, so that I can pull the car into the garage, open the boot, and really easily connect the tender in. So I thought, if that battery tender connection was sitting on the outside, you know, on the actual trim itself, that would be a lot easier. So let me walk you through what I've done so far. Up in here, there's two bolts sticking out where a 2-inch metal black bracket holds quite sturdily this connection for the battery tender, and then there is you can see that this wrap of cables here that feed the tender, the 12 volt external power, and the interior light. It holds all them together, and then there's a zip tie. In fact, I think it's still on it. Yeah, I'll cut that off in a minute. A zip tie that sort of holds those cables in place. So if you take that off, it gives you a perfect template of what I needed to cut in here. So as you can probably see by what I'm trying to do here, I'm actually going to mount the tender connection externally to this. So no door, you'll look straight in the boot and it will be right there ready for you to use. So this 2-inch metal bracket, I'll show it to you in a minute. I can't do it right now because I've actually just had to repaint it black because I've cut it. So it's about yay big. The top half is where it bolts in, where you saw those two sort of bolts sticking out the car, and then there's this section. So I've actually cut it in half. I've kept the other section of it. I'm going to bolt it back into the car, and I've drilled a hole through that so that I can feed the zip tie through, which will hold the cables in place. The second half is the bit that you'll be able to see externally. So I've filed the edges, made it smooth, repainted it black, and then I drew a nice template here and cut through. So this is made of like ABS plastic, and of course the leather. So what I did was I reached for an unused blade, so it's perfectly sharp, and it cut through that like butter. I then got a drill once I could see the black plastic behind here, and just kind of drilled small holes here. I didn't really want to use any other sort of tool like a multi-tool for risk of ruining the leather. As you can see, I've managed to do it actually quite neatly. And then once I popped that plastic out, I just used a file to do the rest. So that's a semicircular one, and as it happens, that's the perfect profile for the bottom. So anyway, hopefully those metal bits have finished drying. I'll show those to you now, and that will explain a hell of a lot more. Okay, so that's the bracket. You can see where I've just, that obviously used to connect into there. The two bolts that are in the car feed through here, and then I've drilled that hole here so that I can feed that zip tie through, which will hold those cables neatly in place. It probably doesn't need it to go back in, but I'd rather just go back the way it was. So that will go back in the car in a sec, and then we're left with this bit. It was satin black, but where I cut it here and filed it back, it obviously took it back to metal. So we pop that on there. That is what you'll be able to see externally now, which I don't think is too bad for the boot. And using this metal bracket, and of course the other end that's in the car has a metal bracket on the back of it as well, it just makes it a lot stronger as opposed to relying on the strength of the ABS plastic behind here. So you can see there's 3 holes through here. I've drilled straight through because you have these screws that go through, screws and nuts. Now, the one thing you will have to do if you want to do this is get some new ones, because these will not be long enough. That barely gets through the thickness of the bracket and the thickness of this plastic. So you'll need something about double that length. I managed to have some laying around which were 20 millimeters in length. They're actually outside at the moment because I've painted them black, because they are silver. I just wanted to try and make it all tie in, and I had some matching nuts to go with it as well. Back in the boot now, you can see that bracket is now remounted. Obviously only the top half of it. You can just see where I've drilled the hole, fed the zip tie through, and tied those cables back up. Okay, so there's the charge port. You can see the shape that I cut out of the trim, and the 3 holes that the back of the screws will go through into, with the nuts on the back. So push that through into there. I have to say I'm quite proud of myself. That's quite a good cut. All right, metal plate on the front. Feed my new screws through. I think I might just pop a nut onto the back of that first one. Just loosely for now. So I'm just holding those nuts with my hand at the back. I'm not sure if I'll need to use a spanner or something to hold them in as it gets tighter. We'll see. Yes, they keep turning. All right. Okay, so I've got everything hooked back up now. Interior light, 12 volt accessories, and there's my tender. That's quite a moment for me. I've not seen that bit of interior trim back in the car for quite some time. And there it is. That's the end result. So now I can simply open my boot, plug in, one-handed operation, and then when I'm ready to go, again, simple, one-handed, unplug. No more pulling out pieces of interior, disconnecting other cables. Simple in and a simple out. Well, there you go. I'm very pleased with that. You know, perhaps for others they may not like this being on show, but you know, that's there. And for the ease of use, just to give you some context, let's go back a little bit. So there we are. There's the boot. You can see the rear light at the back. So I simply pop open the boot, and it's not really, sorry, get a bit of a light, there you go. It's not really on show. From this height you can't even see it. From sort of standing height you've got to sort of crouch down to see it there. And just for context, that's exactly where it used to live, perhaps a half an inch towards the front of the car, but behind that removable panel is exactly where it used to live. So there's no issue with cables being stretched or anything like that. I've simply just brought it to the surface of the trim. So there we go. So that metal piece was the black metal bracket that held it behind, that we cut in half, touched it up with a bit of paint. Had to get some new screws which were 20 mil in length and some matching nuts to go with it. There we go. Solution to a problem which shouldn't really have existed. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's useful for you. If you also had the same connection like I do behind the trim, that's a nice little DIY. It took me about an hour in total. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.